Some people will use your kindness until they mistake it for weakness, but the day you stand up for yourself, they call it revenge. Leah had always been the one everyone could rely on. When her younger brother Bayo lost his job, she didn't think twice before stepping in. She sent him money for rent, bought his groceries, and even paid his hospital bills when he fell sick. She told herself, "He's my brother. I can't let him struggle." But as time passed, something began to hurt her more than the money she was giving. It was the way Bayo treated her in return. At family gatherings, while everyone laughed and talked, Bayo would always find a way to turn her into the punchline. He would smile at her and say in front of everyone, "My sister is just too picky. That's why she's still single." Sometimes he would add, "Maybe her future husband is still lost somewhere." People would laugh, and Leah would force a smile. But inside, each word felt like a small cut to her heart. She never argued with him. She never told anyone how much those words hurt. Instead, she kept quiet, letting the moment pass. But the pain stayed. For a while, she tried to brush it off, thinking, "He doesn't mean it." But the more it happened, the more she realized Bayo didn't respect her kindness. He saw her as someone who would always give, no matter how he treated her. Then one day, during another gathering, Bayo made the same joke again. This time, Leah didn't even hear the laughter around her. She just sat there, feeling a deep shift inside her. It was like a door in her heart had quietly closed. She knew right then that something had to change. She was tired of being the sister who gave everything and got mockery in return. From that day on, she decided she would no longer let his words slide. But she didn't plan to argue or shout. No, she would do something he would never forget. Something that would make him finally see who she really was. She kept smiling when he called to ask for help. She still sent the money he requested. On the outside, nothing seemed different. But inside, Leah had already started building her plan, brick by brick. She began saving more seriously, cutting down on little expenses, and keeping her eyes open for opportunities. Whenever she heard of something that could help her grow financially, she paid attention. Every time Bayo laughed at her, it only gave her more motivation to keep going. He thought she was still the same sister he could tease and depend on forever. But Leah was quietly preparing for the day he would realize he had underestimated her. And deep down, she knew that day was coming. It wouldn't be loud, it wouldn't be dramatic, but when it came, it would be final. And Bayo would finally understand that her kindness was never weakness. The hall was filled with music, laughter, and the smell of food. It was their cousin's wedding, and Leah had dressed beautifully, hoping to enjoy the day without any drama. She was chatting with some relatives when Bayo stood up, holding his glass. Everyone turned to look at him, expecting a toast to the bride and groom. But instead, he grinned and said loudly, "I think Leah's future husband must be lost in traffic. That's why he hasn't shown up all these years." The room erupted in laughter. Some people covered their mouths, others shook their heads, but most found it funny. Leah sat still, forcing a small smile so no one would see how much it hurt. Her eyes scanned the room, and that's when she heard it. Her aunt, sitting just a few chairs away, leaned toward another relative and whispered, "Poor Leah." Those two words pierced her more than Bayo's joke. It wasn't just about the laughter anymore. It was the pity. She didn't want anyone to see her as someone to be pitied. Inside, something shifted. Her heart felt tight, but not from sadness alone. It was a new kind of determination, something she hadn't felt before. She thought about all the times Bayo had embarrassed her in front of others, all the moments she had stayed silent, pretending it didn't matter. But now, it mattered. This moment was different. She kept her smile for the rest of the evening, laughing when needed, talking politely, and making sure no one could guess what was going on in her mind. But deep down, a seed had been planted, a seed of resolve that was slowly taking root. Leah realized that Bayo's words were not just careless jokes. They were signs that he didn't respect her. And if he didn't respect her, it was because she had allowed him to keep crossing the line without consequences. That night, she promised herself that things would change. She didn't plan on confronting him right there, in the middle of the wedding. She wasn't going to ruin someone else's celebration. Instead, she decided to be patient. She would bide her time, think carefully, and wait for the right moment to act. From that day forward, Leah started looking at her life differently. Every word, every action, every choice she made would now be part of her quiet plan. She wouldn't just protect herself from his hurtful jokes. She would show him that the sister he thought was an easy target had strength he had never imagined. And one day, she knew that seed of resolve would grow into something powerful enough to change everything between them. Bayo would laugh one last time, and it would be the day he realized the joke was never really on her. A few weeks after the wedding, Bayo called Leah like he often did. His tone was casual, almost lazy, as if he was asking for something small. "Leah, I'm a bit short again this month," he said. "Can you help me with a little rent money? I'll pay you back soon." She already knew he wouldn't pay it back. He had made that promise too many times before, but Leah didn't argue. Instead, she said, "Of course, Bayo. Just give me your landlord's number so I can transfer it directly." There was a pause on the line. He hesitated for a moment, surprised she wanted the landlord's details, but he didn't question it much. "All right," he said, and gave her the contact. She wrote it down carefully, her mind working faster than her words. What Bayo didn't know was that for months, Leah had been quietly saving. Every extra coin she had, she set aside. She didn't talk about it to anyone. It wasn't a huge amount yet, but she knew it could grow into something big if the right chance came along. Until now, she hadn't been sure where to put that money. But the moment Bayo gave her the landlord's name, a thought sparked in her mind, and it didn't go away. She called the landlord later that day, pretending it was just to arrange the rent payment. But she listened carefully to every word he said. He was friendly, talkative, and soon started complaining about how hard it was to manage the building. "Too much stress for too little reward," he sighed. "I've even thought about selling it and letting someone else deal with it." Leah's heart skipped. She asked casual questions, making sure she didn't sound too eager. How much was he thinking of selling for? Was he serious about letting it go? By the time they ended the call, she already knew. This was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. That night, she sat at her desk, looking at her savings and running the numbers. She could manage it if she moved some things around. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. And suddenly, helping Bayo with his rent wasn't the only thing on her mind. She was thinking bigger, much bigger. When Bayo called the next day to check if she had sent the money, she smiled into the phone and said, "Don't worry, I'm taking care of it." He had no idea how true that was. In his mind, she was still just his generous sister. In her mind, she was about to become something else entirely, the owner of the very place he lived. She kept her voice calm, but inside, she felt a quiet fire. For years, she had been the helper. Now, she was about to become the one in control. And the best part, Bayo wouldn't see it coming until it was already done. Leah arranged to meet the landlord in a small roadside cafe. She told him she wanted to make the rent payment in person, but her real reason was to talk to him face to face. When she arrived, he was already sitting with a steaming cup of tea. They exchanged greetings, and for a while, they spoke politely about the building and the tenants. Soon, the conversation shifted. The landlord leaned back in his chair and sighed. "This building has become too much trouble for me," he said. "Repairs, complaints, late rent payments. I'm tired." He stirred his tea slowly, as if the weight of the building was in his spoon. "Sometimes I think I should just sell it and walk away." Leah felt her heartbeat quicken. She kept her expression calm, but inside, her mind was racing. This was the moment she had been hoping for. She leaned in slightly and asked, "If you really wanted to sell, what would it take? Are you serious about it?" He nodded. "I've been serious for months. I just didn't know who would want it. Most people can't handle the responsibility." Leah listened carefully, letting him talk about the challenges, the upkeep costs, and his frustration with difficult tenants. She didn't interrupt much. She knew the more he talked, the more he would convince himself it was the right time to sell. When he mentioned the price, she mentally calculated her savings, the loans she could arrange, and the extra income she had been putting aside. It would be tight, but it wasn't impossible. In that moment, she knew she could do it. Over the next few days, Leah worked quietly but quickly. She met with her bank, gathered the documents, and arranged the payment terms. She didn't tell anyone, not even her closest friends. She wanted everything to be certain before she spoke a word. By the end of the week, she met the landlord again, this time with a clear offer. He looked at her, surprised. "I didn't think." "You were serious," he said. "I'm very serious," Leah replied. They discussed the details, signed the papers, and just like that, the building had a new owner. The deed had her name on it, and the keys were now in her hand. As she left the meeting, Leah felt a quiet satisfaction. A few days ago, she had been just a sister helping her brother pay rent. Now she owned every wall, every window, every inch of the place he called home. She didn't plan to tell Bayo immediately. No, she wanted him to find out in a way he would never forget. And when that day came, she knew the look on his face would make every step of this journey worth it. A few days after Leah signed the papers, Bayo called her again. His voice was light, almost careless, as he said, "Hey, sis, just checking. When will you send my rent money? The landlord has been reminding me." Leah held the phone close and smiled to herself. She had been waiting for this moment. "Don't worry, I've taken care of it," she replied, keeping her tone calm and casual. She didn't add anything else, and Bayo, thinking she meant the usual bank transfer, simply thanked her and ended the call. But Leah's words carried a truth he couldn't imagine. She hadn't just taken care of the rent. She had taken care of the entire building. Every brick, every window, every corner now belonged to her. She could already picture his face when he would find out. For the next few days, she went about her work as if nothing had changed, but inside, she felt a bubbling mix of excitement and satisfaction. It wasn't anger driving her anymore. It was the quiet joy of knowing that she had turned years of mockery into a victory no one could take from her. Bayo still thought of her as his dependable sister, who would always rescue him at the last minute. What he didn't know was that this time, she wasn't just saving him from late rent. She was about to change the game completely, and when the truth came out, he would understand that she had been playing along all this time, waiting for the perfect moment to show him exactly who she had become. A few mornings after Leah had signed the papers for the building, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Bayo's name. She picked up, her voice calm. "Hello, Bayo." He didn't waste time on greeting. "Hey, sis, just checking in. When will you send my rent money? The landlord's been asking, and you know I don't want any trouble." His tone was relaxed, the same tone he had always used when asking her for help, as if it was a small favor she could easily do. Leah's lips curved into a small smile. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I've taken care of it." She kept her voice steady, giving nothing away. To him, it sounded like she had done what she always did, send the money straight to the landlord. But this time, those words meant something far bigger. In reality, she hadn't just taken care of 1 month's rent. She had taken care of the entire building. Every floor, every apartment, every door. All of it now belonged to her. The papers were signed, the keys were hers, and Bayo was living in a property he didn't know his sister owned. Bayo thanked her quickly, the way someone thanks you when they believe the help will always be there. "You're the best," he said before hanging up. He didn't know he had just thanked the new landlord. After the call ended, Leah sat for a while, letting the feeling sink in. For years she had been the sister who gave and gave, never expecting much in return. She had endured his careless jokes, the mocking words at family gatherings, the way he saw her as someone who would always come to his rescue. But now, she had turned all of that into something powerful. She didn't feel the urge to rush and tell him. This wasn't a victory she wanted to announce. It was one she wanted him to discover in his own time, a truth that would hit harder because it came without warning. She wanted him to feel the shift, the quiet change in power, and understand that she had been playing along all this time. The thought of his reaction made her chest feel warm, not from revenge, but from the satisfaction of knowing she had taken control of the situation without raising her voice or starting a fight. She had chosen her moment carefully, and now, every day that passed, brought her closer to the scene she imagined. The moment Bayo would realize that the person he had been depending on was the same person who now held the keys to his future. And until that moment came, she would continue as if nothing had changed, speaking to him in the same calm tone, letting him believe she was simply helping him again. But inside, Leah knew the truth. She hadn't just helped him this time. She had changed everything. The rain poured heavily that Friday evening, soaking Bayo's shirt as he hurried toward his apartment building. He was tired from the day and just wanted to get inside, change into dry clothes, and rest. He reached his door, slid his key into the lock, and turned it, but it didn't move. Frowning, he tried again, jiggling it harder. Still nothing. Confused, he bent down to check the lock. It looked new. He tried once more, but the key refused to fit. His frustration grew as the rain dripped from his hair onto his face. He began knocking, then banging on the door. "Hello? Is anyone inside?" he shouted. No one answered. A few moments later, The building's security guard approached, holding an envelope. "This is for you," the guard said, handing it over. Bayo looked at it in surprise. The paper was slightly damp from the rain, but the writing on it was clear. It was his sister's handwriting. He tore it open quickly. Inside was a single piece of paper with a short message written in neat, steady letters. "Bayo, I suggest you find a new place. This building has a new owner." For a moment, Bayo just stared at the words. The calm tone made them even heavier. He read it again, and his eyes froze on the signature at the bottom. Leah. It didn't make sense. What did she mean? New owner. And why was she the one telling him this? He looked back at the locked door, then at the paper in his hand. The truth began to form in his mind, but he didn't want to believe it. He marched over to the security guard. "Who changed the locks? Who owns this building now?" he demanded. The guard shifted uncomfortably and said, "We were told to direct all questions to the new owner. And, well, the new owner is your sister." Bayo felt as if the rain had suddenly turned colder. His sister. The same sister who had been paying his rent, who he thought would always help him, who he had mocked so many times, was now the person who owned the roof over his head. He looked down at the letter again. The words were short, but they carried years of unspoken messages. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was simply final. As the rain continued to fall, Bayo realized he had no key, no home, and no idea what to do next. Leah hadn't shouted, she hadn't argued, and she hadn't warned him. She had simply closed the door, and this time it was a door only she could open. Bayo stood outside the building, rainwater still dripping from his clothes, clutching the letter in his hand. His mind was spinning. He pulled out his phone and dialed Leah's number, his fingers trembling with a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. She picked up after a few rings. "What is this, Leah?" he burst out. "You can't do this to me." His voice was unsteady, rising and falling as though he couldn't decide whether to shout or plead. Leah's voice came through the line, calm and even. "I can, and I am." Bayo was silent for a second, as if the firmness in her tone caught him off guard. "I'm your brother," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I've been living here for years. You can't just throw me out like this." Leah took a slow breath before replying. "You think this is about rent or about a place to live. But it's more than that. You thought my love for you meant I'd let you treat me like dirt forever. You were wrong." Her words hit him harder than the rain hitting the pavement. Memories flashed through his mind. The times he had joked about her being single, the times he had called her too picky, the times she had quietly paid his bills without complaint. He had always assumed she would keep doing it, no matter how little respect he showed her. Bayo's voice dropped, no longer full of anger but heavy with shame. "I didn't know it mattered that much to you," he said softly. "It mattered every time," Leah replied. "You just never noticed. And I realized that if I didn't make you see it, you never would. This isn't revenge, Bayo. This is me deciding I won't let you take me for granted anymore." He swallowed hard, staring at the locked door, as if it might open if he just stood there long enough. But Leah's words made it clear. That door wasn't just locked with a key. It was closed by choice. "I don't know where I'll go," he admitted, his voice small. "You'll figure it out," Leah said. "You're capable. You just never had to try, because I made it too easy for you." The line went quiet for a moment, the only sound being the rain in the background. Then Leah spoke again, her tone steady, but not unkind. "Goodbye, Bayo." She ended the call, leaving him standing there, holding the phone in one hand and the letter in the other. His pride, which had always been so loud, now felt like it was crumbling piece by piece. For the first time, he saw his sister not as someone who would always save him, but as someone who had saved herself, and that was something he could no longer control. Relatives began calling one after another, their voices heavy with opinions they were sure were right. Some spoke softly, telling Leah she should forgive Bayo, reminding her of family ties and old memories. Others, in hushed but firm tones, said they understood her completely, that she had endured too much and didn't deserve any of it. Each call carried its own weight, but Leah never raised her voice. She didn't fight or try to make them see things her way. Whenever someone defended Bayo, she simply repeated the same calm words. "You weren't there when he mocked me. You weren't there when he took without giving back." She didn't say it with anger or bitterness, but with a quiet certainty that made the other side of the line go still. Those words carried the truth that no argument could break. Some relatives tried to fill the silence, fumbling for explanations, excuses, or ways to smooth over what had happened. But Leah didn't fill the gaps for them. She let the silence linger like an unwelcome guest, until even the most talkative caller had nothing left to say. And when they hung up, they weren't sure if they were upset with her or with themselves for not understanding sooner. For Leah, it wasn't about proving who was right or wrong. She didn't need their approval or their permission to protect her peace. She had lived the moments they only heard about. She had felt the sting of Bayo's words, the ache of giving endlessly while receiving nothing in return. And now she was done explaining pain to people who had never stood in the room where it happened. The calls continued for days, some full of guilt, some full of judgment. But Leah handled them all the same, with a soft voice, a steady tone, and the same unshakable truth. She knew that her silence after those words did more than hours of talking ever could. It left them to sit with the picture of what had really happened, without her painting it in colours they could easily dismiss. By the end of the week, fewer calls came. The noise faded, and in that quiet, Leah felt lighter. She realised that people who truly cared didn't need convincing, and those who needed convincing would never truly care. Weeks later, the whole building looked completely different. The walls that were once dull and peeling now shone with fresh paint in warm, welcoming colours. The stair railings were fixed, the broken lights replaced, and the smell of dampness had disappeared. People walked through the corridors without rushing past her, without whispering behind her back. For the first time in years, Leah felt the air inside the building was light, not heavy with tension. She had set fair rent rates, making sure no one felt cheated or trapped. The tenants noticed. They paid on time, kept the place clean, and even greeted her with genuine smiles instead of forced ones. There was no fear in their eyes, no hidden anger, because they knew she treated everyone the same. Some even brought her small gifts, fresh bread, a potted plant, a warm thank you card, simple things. But they meant more to her than expensive gestures ever could. One quiet afternoon, Leah walked through the hallway, her steps slow, her eyes taking in every detail. She touched the cool, smooth walls, remembering when she used to stand there with her head down, avoiding attention. Back then, she had been Bayo's sister, the one who stayed silent, the one who let others speak over her. But now, every corner of the building whispered something different. It didn't say she was the shadow anymore. It said she was the owner. She paused by the window at the end of the hall, looking out at the street below. The sunlight hit the glass, making her reflection clear. She saw a woman who had faced humiliation, who had been mocked and underestimated, yet stood here stronger than ever. Every brick, every tile, every door in this place now belonged to her, not just in paper or money, but in pride. She had built respect here, not bought it, not begged for it, but earned it. Some tenants passed by carrying groceries, and instead of avoiding her, they stopped to talk. "Thank you for what you've done," one said softly. Leah smiled, not the shy, uncertain smile she used to give, but a steady one that came from deep inside. "We all deserve a home we can be proud of," she replied, and she meant it. As she moved toward her own apartment, she realized this wasn't just a building anymore. It was proof that she had taken back control of her life. She had turned the place where she once felt small into a space where she stood tall. No one could take that away from her now. The woman who had once lived in the background had stepped into her own light, and she had no intention of ever stepping back. Months later, the air at the family function was filled with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of cutlery. But Leah's presence seemed to quiet the room in certain corners. She walked in with calm confidence, wearing a simple but elegant dress that didn't shout for attention. It simply commanded it. People whispered about her transformation, her success, and the way she now carried herself, like someone who had nothing to prove. Across the room, she saw Bayo, the man who once made her feel small, who used to toss careless jokes at her as if they were harmless, though they cut deep. The moment their eyes almost met, he quickly looked away, pretending to be busy with his drink. Leah didn't rush over, didn't seek him out. She simply mingled with relatives, her laughter genuine, her mind light. Eventually, they crossed paths near the buffet table. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the memory of his words hanging in the air between them. He still couldn't quite meet her gaze. Leah tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a faint smile. Not the smile of someone seeking approval, but of someone who had already moved far beyond needing it. "It's funny, Bio," she said softly but clearly, her voice carrying enough for him to hear over the background noise. "You once joked that my husband must be lost in traffic. Turns out..." She paused just long enough for the weight of her words to land. "I didn't need one to build my empire." Her tone wasn't cruel. It wasn't bitter. It was simply the truth, delivered with the grace of a woman who had fought her battles and won. Bio's jaw tightened, his forced chuckle dying before it could escape. He gave a stiff nod, but there was no clever comeback this time, no sly grin. He looked down at his plate, as if suddenly finding the food more interesting than the conversation. Leah didn't linger. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her back straight. She joined a group of cousins who were eager to hear her stories, her voice blending easily with theirs as if nothing had happened. But deep down, Bio knew, and so did everyone who'd heard her words. The girl they once underestimated wasn't just doing fine, she was thriving. And the best part, she didn't need anyone's validation to know it. If you loved Leah's story, remember, you don't need anyone's permission to rise. Your strength is yours. Your dreams are yours. And so is your victory. Keep building. Keep shining. The world is watching.